So in terms of format of tonight's meeting, at today's meeting, we did go through each article in summary format. Some we went through very quickly because they're routine or frankly fairly uninteresting. Others are very interesting and very consequential. We spent a fair amount of time on those. So I don't know, Archie as chair, it's totally up to you if you want articles presented and summarized, or if you know, Adam Stone is recording this. It's not going out live, but he will be putting this out on local cable.
Angus, why don't you just tell us the 3 or 4 that created that people had questions about?
All right. Well, I think there's obviously going to be a lot of discussion on water. Well, I don't know. To start, the budget. We presented some highlights of the budget. We had some good news, and we took the opportunity to recognize some reductions, obviously with debt service and retirement, but also things like the fact that we aren't carrying police cruiser next year, thanks to Chief Dwyer, and his work to, say we can skip a year with no downside, as well as the assessor's work to bring, tens of thousands of dollars of work that historically has been outsourced is now being brought in-house. So, recognize that. So we talked through some highlights of the budget. We certainly didn't go through it in detail. With water, we spoke generally about the budget and did acknowledge that the operating budget as proposed will require at least a modest rate increase in order to, or a transfer of retained earnings in order to balance that budget of 1.06 is slightly higher than the historical revenues have been. We talked a little bit today about the Church and Prospect water mains, but it was primarily in the context of the overall backlog of water capital needs. And while this is the next on the list, there's a lot of others coming down the road. A question was asked about why is this first on the list and could it be cleaned in line? So we talked about that due to the age of the pipe, that's not practical, that replacement would be needed, and that because of the tuberculation and concerns about fire flow, that this has been next on their list for several years, and it's just kind of his turn.
Did you go into the whole concept of buying the pipe ahead of time? Did anyone object to that at all?
About that today. But as you know, the FinCom booklet does spell that out, and that's something we should make sure people understand that the 2.7 million isn't the total cost; it's the net cost. So we didn't talk about that at today's session. We talked about the with regard to Article 5, the water instructions, rules, regulations. Obviously, there's no specific motion presented, but we talked about the board's intent and bring that forward as being both to proactively engage with Newburyport regarding pursuing a binding intermunicipal agreement that preserves the town's rights to purchase the water that it needs, as well as to pursue wholesale rates for water, and the importance of representation on that negotiating process from the select board, from my office. We talked about the other objective of seeing a longer-term 15-year financial plan, including a projection of future costs and estimated rate impacts associated with estimated debt service on those future capital projects, and the idea that until that is really modeled and complete and clear, the town really doesn't have the information it needs to make informed decisions about how those future needs will be financed. I said there's a general sense that it would be very, very difficult, to say the least, to finance all of that solely on the ratepayers. But that until that's really built out in a financial model, it's a conceptual discussion, and it doesn't really allow the town to deal with it with the specificity or that's needed for the town to even consider a more specific proposal, such as taking on, you know, some or more of the water capital needs into the general fund operating budget. There were definitely questions about that, including from, you know, people who are have private wells and how would that all work. And it was made clear that's nothing that's on the warrant for this spring, but it was clear that the board's interest in seeing a long-term financial plan is to inform those kinds of considerations, given the scale of capital needs that have been presented by the Water Commission.
Did anyone ask about just the whole that whole thing? I'm on a well, I don't want to have to deal with that. Did anyone say that or no?
People said they were on a well, and would they, I mean, you know, they certainly understood that would be, you know, it seemed like people today were open-minded about learning about the problems. And, you know, I didn't, of the people there today, it didn't seem people were dug in one way or the other as to what the solution, but they definitely had their ears open that, okay, wow, it really sounds like there's a problem. And obviously that's the first step to solve a problem, is for people to recognize there's a problem. We did have one question of, you know, from one gentleman who said, I'm on a private well. In the event in the future the town did ever take on the water infrastructure into the general fund operating budget or some portion of it, would I, as a private well owner, be able to be entitled to receive any funding if my well needed replacement, for instance? You know, someone asked that question, and I said I didn't know the answer to that, but those are the types of things that if the town's going to even consider a proposal like that in the future, those are the kinds of things we'll, you know, need to really understand, because people will have those questions and many more.
I mean, I think it may a little bit parallel to that, you know, whether old people without children should contribute to the education of the children. And the answer is, of course they should. But, you know, do people who have wells, should they contribute to the water for the town? And I would say yes. You know, I think, you know, we should be willing to share. I mean, it's our whole community. Anyhow, that's my particular point of view.
I thought the same thing at first, and I try and square that in my head. The schools and the kids, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
But this one is slightly different because it's utilization of a commodity. So I said, well, how about electricity? I pay my electric bill. All these people with solar panels ought to kick back some money to me each month so I can pay my electric bill. Right? Well, no, that's a more reasonable analysis of the water, because you're consuming and you're deciding how much you want to consume of it too.
Yeah.
So that's it. Look at it that way rather than the schools. I mean, they both have certain relevance, but in real time, it's a choice. How much water, how much electric.
But if you see it in a relational way, it's very quite equivalent. The relational town economy relationship. It's
well, also without a water supply, if you know 60% of the homes in this town all of a sudden didn't have a water supply, the town would
Dry up.
maybe not. Yeah, it would dry. Right? It would maybe not dissolve. But it would very quickly become very dysfunctional in a lot of different ways. You know, this building would be able to operate if we didn't have water.
That's why it's the reason why. And I'm not opposed. I'm on a well.
Yeah.
I see it coming, and I fully expect to participate in paying for it.
Yeah.
There's an interesting discussion, you know, back in 1936, when this very issue came up, and there's a wonderful speech on that issue, which you can pull out. And,
oh, yes, yes.
Is that when
no, that was before that. But Elwell was the one who made the speech
oh my goodness.
about basically that we're all one town. So you can pull that out.
We did track that down.
Yes.
In the last few months. Yeah, we should have that right at hand.
Did he give it to the fact that?
Did he say that at town meeting, or what did he say that?
It was quoted in the paper as well. I think he's maybe said it on the floor of the legislature. It seems like he said it in multiple places.
They have to write up to the Archer Reservoir. but under the 1908 one, but the Malton Street one, they didn't, but Elwell was a state rep at the time when he wanted to get money for his land, and he managed to wiggle it. So West Newbury lost all of that, the Malton Street Reservoir and all its tributaries to, that wasn't under the 1908 agreement.
You know, it was, the Newbury had the right to do it under the 1908 legislation.
That they had with his help, because they had it for the Otichurch Reservoir.
And I think that actually a lot of that was actually purchased in the 1910s, back when there was no.
Yeah, I don't know. We talked to my husband about that. He's got all the details, even knows where that special spring is in the reservoir, in the Malton Street Reservoir. Yeah. Yeah. He's not a fan of what he's good, but well.
Okay.
Okay, any other ones, Angus, or?
We talked about the proposed transfer of funds from the CPA Housing Reserve Funds to the Affordable Housing Trust, and the importance.
Did they understand that?
They did. There was, yeah, I mean, conceptually, it's simple. There was a question about, one gentleman asked a question about, does that mean this trust can go buy land? And I said, no. The way the bylaw was written, while the trust does have significant authority and autonomy, acquiring an interest in property was something that was specifically need the select board approval. But I did make clear it would not need town meeting approval, and that once the funds are transferred into the trust, they're really out of the oversight of town meeting. They're under the oversight of the trust, with some certain actions like land acquisition would require select board approval. But I don't think the person had a concern about that. He just wanted to understand it. And I definitely made the point clear that if people are interested in seeing the town actually put those housing funds to use, having them in a trust is far better than not, because it's able to move much more quickly than the twice a year town meeting cycle, which very often wouldn't align with a specific opportunity, such as either acquiring a house and making it affordable, or acquiring an interest in a property, or even providing public assistance is difficult, and if it needs a town meeting vote to appropriate it. We talked a bit about Article 18 on the annual, the corridor planning for pedestrian cycling and equestrian safety improvements. People, and one person in particular, Dick Cushing, and he wasn't at the lunch, but he stopped by my office late morning. I don't know if anyone noticed, but the crosswalks were restriped today.
No.
Really?
So he was delighted. He stopped in, and he was very, very happy that happened. So, and very happy, by the way, that it's part of a much broader effort, a much broader intent to get a lot of safety improvements along the corridor. I think that one I would expect would get a lot of support. There was a question about the zoning. What was the question someone had about? Did someone ask about the zoning?
The recodification?
Joe asked me about the solar afterwards. There's clarification on where it was.
Okay.
What it did.
Okay. We talked a bit about the ash trees, and that the finance committee was supportive of making an investment, but at a lesser amount than is being proposed by the select board, and that that's likely to get some discussion as to what's the right level of investment.
If we want to, so, who should talk about that? If someone asks questions about that at town, who knows the most? Wayne?
Yeah, I mean, he brought it forward.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I personally will, I don't want to, I wouldn't talk over Wayne, but I have my own perspective on it, on what we've approved or, you know, supported is appropriate. And, you know, I intend to, if necessary, speak to that, but, we'll see if it's necessary.
I don't know if Fred's gonna mention it, but he did say he's gonna speak on behalf of the tree committee or report, so I don't know if he's gonna mention that or not.
I think Walter's gonna speak to it, he wrote the rationale. And in our meeting after we get done with you the other night, I asked members if there was any article that once they read what the vote was, if they wanted to speak to, he indicated he would speak to that. So for the 18,000 versus the 60.
We talked about Article 4 on the special town meeting, the study of the privately owned property at 31 Dole Place. You know, that there's been prior investment of public funds in that, you know, understanding that site and getting it fully permitted and added to the town's Water Management Act permit, but that due to both the length of time that's passed and the need to redo some on-site testing, I acknowledge that would require the consent of the landowner, which has not yet been secured. But I also said that there'd be additional testing that didn't take place back then, specifically regarding PFAS, which was not part of the testing that was done in 2016 or 2017, but also that the cost estimates that had been received in the past 2 years or so of the cost to develop the property potentially as a public well field and to get the water where it needs to go through various infrastructure upgrades, you know, was a huge amount of money, and that the select board felt that given both the passage of time, but also just the scale of potential investment, felt that it was very important to get an outside review to make sure that those cost estimates were reliable, complete, and that we had really a complete kind of independent review of both the engineering and the permitting that would be required, and that was going to be necessary in order for the board to make a, you know, fully informed decision as to whether you will intend to bring that forward for proposed public acquisition or not. And so that was, and that had been talked about earlier in the event today with regard to the future water capital needs. We talked about water main replacements and the order of magnitude kind of cost that could be, and then acknowledged that over and above that could be an additional tremendous cost if the town decided to acquire and develop a new site for a public well field. So that just pushes the urgency of the question in Article 5 of the importance of having a financial plan and a model that accounts for all of that to see if is that feasible or possible, and if so, under what circumstances. I did, with regard to the Page School HVAC, I did let people know that the select board had voted that the ARPA funds would be used to fund that work, and that would therefore be passed over without action. So Mike, that's letting you know that too. And we talked a bit about the matching funds for the MBTA communities planning process, and that's going to be really a major initiative that will formally kick off this coming Tuesday with the planning board.
Is the vote on Article 15 correct? I thought it was 3-0.
Did anyone of us vote against the fence?
I
did not.
Actually, quite honestly, I think he did vote against it.
No,
In fact, I went down there and looked at it and agreed with it.
Okay.
he voted against number 14.
Okay, it's in here in the booklet is 2-1. So if that's incorrect, then that's incorrect.
Yeah, all right.
Let the record show it wasn't Jim's fault.
That's an awesome.
Oh, now playing the sympathy cards. So no questions on all the water items?
No, I mean, a lot of those I think people view as not housekeeping, but, you know, basic,
Yeah.
there's, you know, there's things that needed to run a water department.
It's just unusual to have so many, you
Mhm.
know, in one meeting.
Yeah.
I have a question on my number 17, which is not there. Should there be numbers with regard to the select board and the finance committee on the resolution to change the
So,
flag or not?
so there wasn't any votes because it's not an article.
Oh, okay, yeah, like I know there was a meeting with the select board. And I think it was 2-1 in agreement with it. And there was a meeting with the finance committee, but I don't know.
I think that was just to include it in the brochure.
Yeah,
All right.
there's no actual vote on it because it's not an actual article.
Okay.
Okay, anything anyone wants to add?
No.
Good. Motion to adjourn, well, I don't know if this is a.
It is.
It is,
a
yeah.
meeting, okay,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.